I'll just maybe give it to like 12:02 or 3 at least before I kick off, if that's all right.
That
Cool.
sounds good. We've got a few more people joining, and I've turned off the lobby so it'll stop pinging as well while you're talking.
Thanks. Yeah. Boom, ding. Cool, I'll just give it a minute. Can everyone see my screen okay? The presentation. I see thumbs. Awesome. Okay, it looks like that's us. Okay, budd-daliadau, gweithio. Hello, welcome. My name is James Graham, delivery manager here at CDPS, and I'm here to talk about this last sprint's activity. A sprint is 2 weeks. If you want to find out more about what we've done previously in our project, please go to our website. The video from the previous show and tell is embedded in there. At least our colleague will share the links as well as our contact email and diary invites and calendars in the chat during this show and tell. So keep a lookout, and it'll also be emailed to you afterwards. So the project is streamlining Welsh Benefits, and we're a full multidisciplinary team from CDPS. I think some representatives of Welsh Gov may be joining us today to answer any questions as well, but if not, we can cover as much as we can. We have 2 work streams for this project, just to give you a very quick overview. One is user research focused and one is service design focused. The first work stream, we've considered some how might we statements. So how might we make it easier for marginalised people in Wales to find access and receive the benefits they are entitled to? Marginalised groups being disabled people, carers, single mothers, people with no recourse to funds, asylum seekers. I may have missed one out, apologies. The second work stream is a service design one. So how might we make it easier for people to access multiple benefits while reducing duplication and admin burden for local authorities? So my colleagues will be discussing both of those work streams in more detail. So just to give you an these are the objectives of those. Understand how marginalised people in Wales experience the benefit system, find out what stops them from getting the support they should have, and learn how they're using the 3 Welsh benefits. And workstream 2 is testing a streamlined user experience concept with the Welsh councils, check if it's feasible, viable and desirable, and build support from the councils to help it grow. So if I hand over now to our user researcher, Tom, who'll be able to go in more detail about the user research. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, James. Hi, everyone. I'm Tom Brame. I'm the user researcher who's leading the user research with marginalised groups. Just to quickly recap on what we updated you on last time. So we've had 5 user groups identified that represent marginalised people. So those are disabled people, carers, single parents, people from minority ethnic backgrounds, and people with no recourse to public funds, primarily asylum seekers. And we started off by doing a lot of outreach to different organisations that work with those groups and represent those groups. And that paid off in this sprint. We managed to do quite a lot of research activity with the help of lots of those organisations who helped set up these opportunities. So today I'm just going to run through what we've managed to do over the last couple of weeks. So we continued our remote interviews with marginalised people. I think the final score was 10 remote interviews. We went out and did lots of in-person research. So we did some pop-up research in Cardiff Central Library in the hub. That's where things like the money advice service and opportunities to speak to Cardiff Council are. So lots of relevant people coming through there. We did some user focus groups and a proxy interview at an organisation called East in Swansea. It's a charity that works with people from minority ethnic backgrounds and asylum seekers and refugees. We also did some pop-up research with residents of a supported accommodation spot in Grangetown. And we did a spotlight session with Community Housing Cymru with representatives of that organisation from different housing associations across Wales. They are proxy users, so they are obviously not users of benefits, but they're people with a higher level understanding of the experiences of lots of people who have to engage with benefit systems. So that was important too. The next slide is, I think it's important to give you a little bit of context about what in-person research looks like, what it involves. So we went out a few times over the last couple of weeks and did some in-person research. Like I said, there's a couple of pictures there that kind of show you what that looks like in reality. So the picture on the top right is a little spot we set up in the hub in Cardiff Central Library. That was more for kind of passing trade, if you will. And the second picture there is Sarah standing in front of what ended up being a bit of a storefront for us. We were in a building, we were given access to a building that was a little bit out of the way, so we had to really try and attract people to come and take part. If you look really closely, you can see the secret weapon that we used in both those instances, which was a big bowl of chocolate. That's some tips and tricks from the trade there. But in-person research in reality is really challenging. It takes quite a lot of resource to set these things up. There's a lot of admin and logistical plates to spin. So we had to do recce's to these places to make sure that they're suitable. We had to do lots of liaising with the people who could give us access. We had to collect all our collateral, make sure we had banners and things to kind of clearly signpost who we are and what we were doing. They're also quite unpredictable. So in both those instances, there were hours that went by when no one spoke to us, and we felt like we'd walk away having spoken to no one. But in reality, they're actually incredibly valuable and rewarding. So we spoke to, over the 3 pop-up and in-person research sessions we did, we spoke to 21 different people, which we were really happy with. And that is vital insight for this project. Next slide, please, James. So in terms of the figures, the amount of people we spoke to, in total, we spoke to 31 separate marginalised people. What's important to mention is that lots of those people represent more than one of the user groups we were interested in. The technical term for that is intersectionality. For example, if you look at that little table there, the second line down is remote interviews with carers. And these are people who came to us through a carers network, so primarily identified as carers, but actually when we spoke to those people and found out a bit more about them, they were all disabled in some way, and 2 of them were single parents as well. So if you take into account all that intersectionality, we've actually spoken to people who represent 48 instances of our user groups. And additionally, we've spoken to 10 proxy users as well. Like I said, the majority of those were from different housing association organisations, but one was from a charity working with migrants, asylum seekers and refugees. Next slide, please, James. So we've wrapped up our research, and the next step is analysis of all that information. So thanks to all the many research activities we were able to do, we've now got over 3,000 individual notes, individual pieces of data to analyze. We're doing something called thematic analysis on that. So that involves going through all those notes and starting to group related notes. So for example, if multiple people are telling us that they need support to complete an application form, then that becomes a theme. And then the next step is to convert those thematic findings into insights, so to understand the why behind that. So people need support to complete an application form because application form information is complex and people struggle to understand it, or because they're available in paper form only and people with disabilities struggle to fill them out by hand, that kind of thing. And I thought I'd leave with just a few examples of some of the messages and quotes that have been coming out of the research to give you a flavour of some of the things we've been hearing. So the first one there is that the application form took them a few days to fill in, as it's handwritten. This was a disabled person, and their condition meant that they get hand spasms and they tire easily. So yeah, an application form is taking people sometimes days to complete. Someone else said, because of a previous bad experience, it's not worth it for a couple of quid. I'll just struggle on. So people are turning down opportunity for the funding that they're eligible for. Other people missing out on it because of lack of awareness. So one person missed out on council tax reduction for 6 years because he just wasn't aware of it. He later became aware of it and started claiming it, but you can't retrospectively claim for the time he's missed out on. And the final one there is that it would be so much more simple if there was a one-stop shop for benefits. So this is really supporting the kind of message behind the streamlining of benefits that we're looking at. And that's everything from me. So I'm going to hand over to Adam, I believe.
Thanks, Tom. So I'll just recap on what I told you at the last show and tell a couple of weeks ago. So in a previous phase of work, we created a concept for a streamlined application process. We tested it with some users, but we hadn't tested it with councils to see whether it was feasible for them to put such a thing into practice. And so previously we've tested it with 4 councils. And we tested those ideas, and those ideas can string together to form 2 different journeys. So journey 1 is for residents who are in the universal credit data share. It's quite an automated journey. It has minimal proactive input from the applicants themselves. And that tested really positively with the councils, with all of them either doing some of the ideas already or being open to embracing them if certain barriers were overcome. So that worked really well. Journey 2 tested relatively positively, but there was an issue we had. So it's those residents who are actually filling in an application form to apply for one of these 3 in-scope benefits. And the problem that we came across is that what we were trying to propose in order to minimise the amount of information someone has to put into an application form is that councils use other data sources they have access to access that information instead of asking the applicant to provide it. And in this case, Searchlight, which is a DWP database, would be a key player in that space. And what we learned from some of the councils we spoke to is that Searchlight is missing some key information that is required for council tax reduction assessments. So last time we spoke about the next steps that we were going to look at. So one of them was exploring the legal gateway to use the universal credit data share to identify people who are eligible for both free school meals and the school essentials grant. And the rest of the project team, the central project team, has kindly offered to pick up the baton on that one. So they're going to be looking at the various options we have for councils to be able to unlock that piece of functionality. The good news is it seems to be it's being done already by many councils in England. DWP are open to the idea, and it seems like it's a relatively straightforward process to get that fixed. The other thing we want to do later on is explore a proof of concept with 1 or more councils. But what we focused on in the last sprint is this second next step, which was a detailed analysis of what data a single application form needs to collect for different cohorts. And before we move on, just to explain, so the fact that Searchlight is missing some key information made us realise we need to really understand what information is missing, because then we know we need to ask applicants to provide that in the form itself. Next slide, please. So I mentioned cohorts, and I just wanted to quickly expand on that a little bit to explain what it is we're talking about. So a cohort is obviously a group of people who share a set of characteristics, and we believe that different cohorts who are applying for these benefits will need to provide different amounts of information based on their existing circumstances. So we've got 3 examples here. So if we take the one at the bottom, so this is someone who's of pension age, they've retired, their children have left home, they're receiving pension credit, and they're actually receiving the guaranteed element of that. Now, a person in that situation is automatically passported into receiving the full amount of council tax reduction. So in theory, the amount of information we need to ask somebody like that is very, very low. You know, exaggerating for effect, we could ask them their name and their national insurance number, and then the rest of the information we need to be able to grant them the full pension credit would be available via Searchlight. So we would need very little information from that cohort. Similarly, a single parent who's unemployed, has a long-term health condition or a disability and is receiving universal credit would also need to provide very little information. They wouldn't need to explain about their partner or any non-dependents that live with them or any earned income, etc. And a lot of the information that would be required to grant them a full council tax reduction would be available via Searchlight. But then the last one, this person who's self-employed, their earnings are below what's called the universal credit minimum income floor, who is also sharing their property with other adults who aren't related to, so non-dependents, is in a more complicated situation, and we would expect them to need to provide a lot more information and evidence in order to be able to assess them effectively for council tax reduction. So that's just a quick explanation of what we mean about the cohorts and why it's important to try and identify them. Next slide, please. So what we're working on now is what is the most simple single application form we could possibly create. And in order to do that, we can need to look at what do councils need to know to assess people for the 3 in-scope benefits. What do the councils have access to already via existing data sources? And if you take that one away from the other, what you're left with is what an applicant must provide in their application. And of course, we accept that some councils want to still ask for additional information over and above that for certain reasons. But if we can start with a baseline of the absolute bare minimum that we know someone must provide in an application form, that gives us something to build on. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to explain what that means about what we've been doing in the last sprint. So we've been looking at what do councils need to know, what do they have access to, and therefore what must the applicant provide in an application form. And so first of all, we've collected a list of what councils must consider if they're going to assess someone for council tax reduction, housing benefit, or free school meals or school essentials grant. And we've got that covered off now, so we've got that full list in place. What we're struggling with is knowing in detail what councils have access to. So we've got a pretty good idea about VEP, which is Verify Earnings and Pensions, which is an HMRC database. But with Searchlight, we don't have a detailed understanding at this stage. So the councils that we tested the concept with have explained to us that there is some missing information at a high level, and we've taken note of that. But we don't have a detailed understanding of what that is at this stage and how that varies between people who are receiving universal credit or people who are receiving pension credit. So what we've been doing is trying to track this information down. And at the moment, we're now in touch with DWP and we're working with them, and hopefully they're going to be able to help us understand what Searchlight does surface to councils for these different circumstances, but we're not quite there yet. What we've been doing in parallel is then looking at, if we make some assumptions about what's going to be asked in an application form, what order we might ask them in, so that each person who's turning up, bearing in mind they will represent a different cohort, only answers the questions that are relevant to them and therefore provides the minimum amount of information that they would need to. So that's what we've been doing in the last sprint. Next slide, please. So if there are any people from councils on the call now, I ask, could you help us improve our understanding of what Searchlight is missing when it comes to assessing people for council tax reduction? We have a high level understanding of this, but we could do with understanding in more detail what's missing and how that varies depending on the different circumstances that applicants are in. So please get in touch if that's something that you can help us with. And that's all I have to say today. So I think we can pause and stop for any comments or questions.